ahead then.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Today, for Sitara Seminar Series, we have Professor Basant Maheshwari sir with us. He is professor in water, environment, and sustainability at Western Sydney University. He has over 30 years of teaching, research, and outreach experience, and his current research has a particular focus on water resource modeling, groundwater monitoring and management, urban water, river health, irrigation, water education, engagement and capacity building, environmental sustainability, and water for livelihood and well being. During the last 10 years, Professor Maheshwari's work has involved a transdisciplinary approach to water research and led a project called MARVI related to the groundwater management in Rajasthan and Gujarat. His efforts have focused on evaluating the role of people and working with them for the change. Also, his work emphasizes that complex water and environmental problems requires well-designed simple solutions that will result in situation improvement and livelihood improvements. Professor Maheshwari has more than 240 publications to his name, including over 110 articles in peer-reviewed international journals, and led several major externally funded research projects around Australia, Asia, and Africa. We are happy to have you, sir, amongst us. And on behalf of the Sitara family, I welcome you. And now we shall proceed towards this session.
Thank you very much for these kind words. And it's really pleasure to present this talk on MARVI. And like to acknowledge panel who was part of this project for some time and still continues to be part of this. And this project has been running in India, in Rajasthan and Gujarat for last 8 years. And so I would like to share the screen and start the presentation. Are you okay? Sorry about this. So the project MARVI is basically managing aquifer recharge and sustaining groundwater use in India through village level intervention. As I mentioned, this project started 8 years ago, so in 2012 in Rajasthan and Gujarat. So let's look at surface water versus groundwater. So surface water, there are water is both waters are part of the hydrologic cycle. Surface water, uh, we are talking in water in rivers, lakes, dams, and so on. And the groundwater is the invisible water. So you don't see that water, but it's there. And so the underground flow cannot be controlled as compared to surface water. So uh, water underground will move in response to the hydrogeology of the area. And so compared to surface water, we have no control, whereas in surface water, we can control water flow through canals, rivers, and so on, and putting dams, so on, all those things. Another important part of groundwater is pumping is hard to monitor and control in country like India. So we have millions of bores and dug wells and so on. And it is very hard to monitor and also control who can get how much water. And the problem we face is excessive use of groundwater. So we are using more water than what is recharged every year. So that is a hard concept. So if you talk to people who haven't developed this idea about groundwater, and they think that there is an underground river flowing, and so as you go deeper there's more water there, but in reality groundwater is also limited like water in a dam or river. So when there is not enough recharge and more pumping, then eventually you run out of water. It's a decentralized resource, so groundwater is everywhere, and there is no particular place or area where you have the groundwater. It's everybody is taking out the groundwater, and so every farm or every field, uh, the use is being done. So it's a decentralized, and also government investment has been low. So with the dam construction, for example, you can see physically where the dam is, and you can even cut the ribbon and like that. But with groundwater, whatever improvements you do, they are not visible because it's underground. So these are some of the issues with groundwater as compared to surface water. Now, if we look at groundwater use, so we get rain about 3 months, and out of those 3 months means 90 days, we get rainfall for between 20 and 30 days at the most, depending upon where you are and how the monsoon is performing. And rest of the year we depend on groundwater. And in India, 60% of our irrigated agriculture depends on groundwater. 80% of drinking water in rural areas is from groundwater. Even in urban areas, 50%, and also more than 50% is used by industry. So if there is any issue, any problem with groundwater, we are in big trouble. And that's what we are experiencing now, and also more so with the climate change. So if there is drought, for example, the only source is groundwater then. And so we need to manage, and the groundwater is very important. Even in Australia, for example, uh, there are areas which depend on groundwater, and but the difference is it's not freely available. So if you want to pump groundwater, you have to obtain a license, and that is regulated and so on. But many parts of the world, including India, we have we don't have virtually any regulation. There is a talk of regulation, but it's not easy. In country like Denmark, all the water supply is groundwater. If you go to Mexico City or some other cities, they very much depend on groundwater. And some of you probably not born that time, but in 70s, 1970s, there was green revolution. So high yielding, improved wheat and other crop varieties came in, and farmers started growing, and that really made India food wise self sustaining. But the other side of this was the very high level of groundwater use, and that really started the depletion of groundwater. And also there are other things that have happened. So for example, uh, the arrival of electric pump or diesel pump. So what farmer used to do in terms of lifting groundwater from a well for a whole day, the pump was able to do within few hours or 1 hour or 2 hours. And also then came the drilling technology. So there are now drills available. You can go as deep as you want from 50 meter to 500 meter or even more. And that really changed the future of groundwater. All those things have changed the way groundwater is used and the sustainability of groundwater. So the challenge is groundwater is an invisible resource. So you don't see where it is and how much it is and which way it is flowing. Not easy to um, find out. So that's a challenge in terms of managing. So if you want to manage something, you need to measure, and measurement sometimes is not easy. So um, that's a challenge. And when something is invisible, it is hard to communicate. So we don't see the groundwater until it comes out of a pump or in a well. So we don't communicate very easily. So how much it is there, where it is flowing, what is the quality, unless we take a sample out and so on. So this communication is one of the challenges with groundwater science and management. So understanding how groundwater moves and being stored, and then how do we manage. So management comes when something is valuable, something is scarce. So for example, you have certain number of hours available in a day, and if you have so many things to do, then comes the management. Means we have to manage it uh, in a more um, sustainable way to cope with the scarcity. So same applies to groundwater. So the challenge is there is a need of groundwater by different activities. So drinking is number one. So we need water for drinking, whether you live in a city or a village. And the industries depend on groundwater. So they require groundwater, and industries provide jobs to people and provide national income. So they are also important. Environment is very important because if water is not there, especially groundwater, it can impact because the groundwater is a part of the hydrologic cycle. So it's not separate thing. Although we can say it's a surface water, groundwater, and water in the air and like that, but it's a part of the hydrologic cycle, and one feeds into another. So for example, when rivers are flowing like in monsoon now, at the moment, so some of the water in rivers flows back into groundwater system, and when rivers gets drier like in March, April, some rivers still flow although there is no rain, and that water in river is most likely from groundwater, so water flowing back into the river. And so it's a very connected system. Groundwater, surface water is connected, so what affects one can affect the another one. Some of the trees, some like mango tree for example, they have a very deep rooted system, and in many places I have seen Rajasthan, for example, the mango trees have dried up. And one of the reasons, or probably the most important reason, is groundwater has gone too deep. And what you get as rain, stored soil moisture, is not enough to meet the demand of the water requirement, for transpiration for rest of the year. And so some of those plants or trees can die. And so this is demand side, and there is a, supply side, which is through rainfall. So groundwater is not generated underground. It's all the water we get from rain and flows into through the soil to the deeper layers into the aquifer. So we need to balance. So if we can balance the groundwater demand and groundwater supply in a good sustainable way, then we have supply for long time. But this is not happening at the moment because we are pumping more water than what is recharged. So, balancing groundwater use. So, groundwater is a replenishable resource, means uh, you use it and put it back into the system and you can reuse again and again. And so, it's a replenishable resource. And so, we need to balance the reuse of use of groundwater with recharge. So, it's just like ATM machine, for example. So you put some money into the machine, then you can withdraw the machine of the money from the machine. Same for groundwater. So you have to recharge and then you can pump it out. But if we don't do this, then we are in trouble. So the problem of the groundwater. So what has happened in last 40 years, 30, 40 years? Groundwater levels have fallen too deep from what it used to be 10 to 15-meter deep to now 50 in last 50 years, for example, gone up to 500 meters or even more in some places. So I was in Bangalore area in Karnataka last year, and some of the places we visited, and they said they are pumping out water from 1,000-meter deep. Can you imagine? 1,000 meters. So that's the level of depletion. And water scarcity for agriculture, drinking, and industries. That's where we have challenge. And groundwater also can affect socially, culturally, economically. So, for example, there are incidences where if no water, or especially groundwater in some villages, people don't marry, parents don't marry their daughters in those villages. And so it creates a social problem like that. So, solution, what can we do? Now, the groundwater is going deep, but we still need water to drink, to grow crops, and for industries. So, some people suggested we can control groundwater by enacting some law. So, say you can't withdraw, you can't put a bore here or can't dig deeper. And if somebody doesn't obey that law, they can be punished or like that. So, how effective that can be, especially in country like India. So, if people will find some way out, and and in many states there is a law, but it's very difficult to implement because water is a uh, political, social, economical, cultural, and emotional issue. So, if you interfere, there could be riots, for example. If you say some farmer you can't dig or you can't take this water, it's not possible. Then some people came up with some technical solution. So um, they have came up with some smart card. So you put that card into the pumping system, and you are allowed to take certain volume of water of 3 hours of pumping or whatever. And then when your time is finished, the pump will stop, and you will have to wait another day or another few days when your turn comes. Now, again, this is a very nice solution, but can this in reality work? Because people will find some another way to take that water or interfere with the machine. And really, I think you are constraining people. So maybe not suitable, maybe not, maybe work for a while, and then if the whole system fails, then doesn't work. So, with those uh, issues in mind, um, so we thought what to do. So, we got this funding from the Australian government, and so we uh, linked up with some NGOs and the university in Udaipur. So, Maharana Pratap University of Agriculture and Technology, Vidya Bhavan Krishi Vigyan Kendra, and then Development Support Center in Gujarat, and Aid Communities and Technology also in Gujarat. And we worked with the International Water Management Institute and also in Australia's CSIRO, which is the leading science research organization. So we came up with the idea that we need to do something different if we want to produce something sustainable. So we first thought of why do we have groundwater problem? What is the reason? The reason is greed. Means you have a well and you want to take all the water you can so that you can irrigate all the land you have. And so if everyone does like this, and then water start depleting, then you drill deeper because you borrow money or you have money and you go deeper and deeper, and you go deeper, your neighbor goes deeper. So there is no end to this. So this is a greed. And then limited knowledge, whether you are a farmer or whether you are a policymaker or somewhere in between. uh, the understanding of groundwater is also very limited because it's underground, and the science, although we have developed lots of things, but still, if you want to measure how much, want to estimate how much groundwater is there in particular village area or particular city or whatever, uh, still we're not sure how much. Still, we could be in error and lack of understanding of what we are doing. So many people don't understand that groundwater is limited resource and so on. So what this means is it's a people related problem, and that means we need people based solution. So if problem is related to people and if we impose some other solution, technical solution or some other um, policy intervention which is more legalized thing, it may not work long for a long time. So we need a something people oriented solution, and that's where MARVI we started. So MARVI project, so in this MARVI project we focused on three aspects. One is participatory data collection. So we work with the farmers and they become our citizen scientists. They are uh, fifth class pass or maybe 10th class pass, and they attended school long time ago. So these are the people. So they become our citizen scientists. And then sharing this information and building understanding. So whatever data they collect, we help them to understand, analyze, and we help them to build understanding. Means what is happening to their groundwater level, how much it is fluctuating, what sort of rainfall they are getting, and what is the water quality. So they start sort of internalizing it, sort of start understanding what is happening in their own village, in their own well. Then I think we got engaged. So and third thing is engaging with the policymakers, government people, groundwater users, that is farmers, uh, and other stakeholders like school children, community at large, and so on. So these were the three key elements of this MARVI project. So when we started this project, uh, we had we had 9 organizations involved. So it's a very large combination of organizations, and so we had 30 researchers and 35 farmer researchers. So it's not a small project in terms of people and working together, and we have worked for last 8 years and it's still continuing. And this project was in the Dharta watershed in Rajasthan and Meghras watershed in Gujarat. And both these watersheds have a catchment area or watershed area of about 5,000 hectare, and the rainfall between 600 to 800 millimeters annual rainfall. The watershed in Gujarat is dominated by tribal people, whereas in Rajasthan it's a normal general population. So we had a very good contrast in two areas, and also they are about 200 kilometers apart. So when we were thinking of how to do this project, so at the design stage of this project, we had two options. One was we collect data, so lots of data we can collect through sensors and our own measurements, and do a modeling. So use various models or develop our own, and then look at different scenarios and come up with recommendation. So that was one option. And the second option was bring people together to own the problem. And then people monitor groundwater, learn together. So these are the ordinary people. They learn, monitor, learn together and develop their own science. So it's not the science we see in the textbooks, but develop the science, what they observe, and then work together to develop options and strategies to what to do. So this was the second option. Now, with the option one was easier because you just measure data, you analyze in using Excel or some other things, and produce number of tables or modeling you do, and we could have published lots of papers by the amount of data we collected. The option two was very time consuming and also requires a lot of patience. So during the um project work, for example, we stayed less time in hotel or in the city. We spent more time in the villages, working with the farmers, sitting with the farmers, and being part of them. So that was the difference, and that led community to start becoming um, part of the research team, and they started develop that trust. We started developing that trust. So what happened was these sorts of activity led to core learning, and the project is now ongoing, still going, because it initially was 4 years, extended for another year. Then we got more funding for another 2 years, and now we got more 3 years funding. So, and also we connected with the government, with the other stakeholders. Now it is part of Atal Bhujal Yojana from the Jal Shakti Ministry and the World Bank. So the idea of MARVI, participatory village level groundwater monitoring and management, is being used in 7 states of India, and Maharashtra is one of them. And so this is the level of engagement and sort of outscaling we could achieve. But if we had option one, we would have lots of papers and so on, but the people would have forgotten and moved on to another project and so on. And not only in India, this project is now we are working in Africa, in Uganda and Botswana, and there is interest in Laos, for example. So the idea is the problem is complex, but the idea is simple. How you can work with community to do this. So the MARVI approach. So to further explain, so there are three elements here. If you are in the field, want to measure manage the groundwater, so one is the community. Community is the users of the groundwater, people who depend on groundwater. So farmers, the general population, and then there are other users. And there is a science of groundwater. So like people like us who have a little bit more understanding from technical point of view. So the science is important. And then the third aspect is the government. So policymakers, the other uh, groups like Central Groundwater Board, they are very important. They play an important role. And so there are lots of uh, people who have done really good work in, say, Maharashtra. So there is a name called Hivde Bajar. So they did excellent work. This Popat Bhai Pawar, he has done wonderful work, and a good example. Similarly, in Rajasthan, Rajendra Singh ji has done work on how he engaged people, and there are many other examples. And so they are very successful, but they didn't expand to everywhere in India, even in Maharashtra, for example, Hivde Bajar. So it was good there, but didn't go multiply in a large scale throughout Maharashtra, for example. The reason was they did good work, but they didn't develop the either science of groundwater at a level that they can explain and okay, you can now try another area. And also they didn't connect with the government well. So what in this project we tried to do is we brought these three elements together, and that's how we developed the science. So there are lots of manuals and publications we have developed. We worked with the community and we developed the way how you can engage community and also government at different levels. So we connected with them, and that's how now they're aware of what we have done and they want to use this sort of approach at a larger scale. So that was the framework we used. So to explain further what actually we did, so in MARVI project we had four elements. One, the researchers, so all the researchers from Western Sydney University, IMI, and CSIRO, and the university, and so on, and NGOs, and then we had these farmer researchers. We called them Bujal Jankars. So Bujal Jankars, or they call themselves BJs, and these are the people who were actually working in there, and schools and village communities and gram panchayat, state level, central level government agencies. So this sort of gives you what we how who were involved in marvi. So marvi is about local management of groundwater, that's village level. Because groundwater, the storage movement varies from one place to another place. So one village to another village. One village could have a good, especially in hard rock areas, one village could have a good supply of groundwater. Another village, another farm may not have that supply of water. So I have seen many times that one particular farm, they have a good, their well is has a good supply of groundwater, and only 300 400 meter away, another farmer had dug the well, and he doesn't have the same amount of water. So it can vary. So local management is very important, uh, and local monitoring is very important. So three things we need to understand. One is the aquifer recharge. So understanding how rainwater is going into the soil, into the deeper profile, into the aquifer, and so we need to understand the recharge process and how we can do better recharge. And the second thing is groundwater use. So how we can reduce this use of groundwater. At the same time, we maintain the income of the farmer. So either by using crops, varieties which take less water, or efficient irrigation method, or irrigation scheduling, means irrigating at a certain moisture level so that you don't waste water, And the third element is the engagement. So you can have the two parts good, equivalent recharge. You understand, you know what what crops to grow and so on. But if we didn't engage with the people who are affected or who will benefit, then whole thing will fail. So these three are equally important. And the ultimate aim is to have the cooperative management of groundwater. So what did we do in the MARVI project? So we trained these Bujal Jankars and worked with them on ongoing basis. They collected groundwater depth data, rainfall data, water quality, checked them water level, and we also collected socioeconomic data to understand what is happening. So not just technically, but we need to understand socially, economically, and so on, and worked with the local school and community groups. So Marvi means we are working with everybody, not just farmers or not just one group of people, but everybody, because they will be one way or the other another way will be connected. And worked with Gram Panchayat and state government agencies, developed tools and resources for data collection, analysis, and capacity building. So we even developed a app called My Well. So it's available on Android platform. Also we had on the uh, Apple iOS system as well, and connected with the policymakers. So these are the things we did. So these Bhujil Jankars, so in Rajasthan we had 25 of them, and we had 5 villages in Rajasthan and 6 villages in Gujarat. So this each village had 5 these Bhujil Jankar, and then each Bhujal Jankar monitored 50 wells. So we had 250 wells monitored in Rajasthan and 110 wells monitored in Gujarat. And we trained these BJs in the field in some classroom situation about hydrogeologic concept in their own language at their own level. uh, and we also worked with them mapping their area, their village, and helped them to understand how to measure water table, water quality. And so with this training they really felt empowered, and they were the local champions. So when we went to the field in the villages, they were already there to and talking with the villagers on our behalf. So they were sort of scientists in a way, co-workers, core scientists, and they really felt empowered. So um, earlier they were not consulted, and but we really gave them respect and worked with them. So this is a slide showing these are some of the pictures taken of the maps produced by these BJs. And when you think of BJs, they are ordinary people in the villages, the farmers or some other people, and they have only had primary education or high school at the most. But they had a lot of life experience because they have been working on the farm or in other activities. So life experience. So on this side you can see uh, they are being trained in the geology, different rock types. Here the farmer is being explained about how to measure rainfall. They had some classroom teaching. And this is another picture of these BJs in Gujarat, uh, learning about different things, water quality, for example. In this one, here they are being uh, trained for measuring water table. Very simple instrument, just the measuring tape and the wooden float, and we kept things simple. This is a classroom in Udaipur, and this is one of the BJs in Gujarat. So he's just marking the wells they are going to monitor. And we had lots of meetings with the village people. These are the group of BJs in Gujarat. This is one of the meetings in Gujarat again. So we had these meetings, working with them, sitting with them, eating food with them, and that sort of thing. So everybody was at equal level. And these are some of the data in one of the villages in Rajasthan, measured by uh, BJs, one of the BJs. So when they started plotting these things, they could understand, okay, this is how water level in my well is fluctuating. And then after a few years, they started developing their own correlation um, um, rule of thumb, uh, without using any Excel, for example. So, okay, if my water level rise between June and September by so many meters, that means I can irrigate so many biga or hectare of land. And so they started doing some mental calculation, and they were able to do because they have the actual data from their area. Central Groundwater Board has thousands of these piezometers. Piezometers means the well to monitor the groundwater levels, and so they are very good. This was a great initiative, but say in whole block there will be about 10 to 15 such wells, and they won't tell much about the village level or field level. But what these farmers or these BJs measure is at a very small scale, and they can understand what is happening in my well or my village, and then they can plan and they can talk about it. Also, these by doing these measurements, for example, rainfall. So before this project started, and if you talk to farmer how much rainfall, they will say very good rainfall or not very good rainfall. So their indicator was good, bad, or like this. Or maybe they will say enough rainfall that there was flow on the ground. So that was their indicator. But after year of monitoring, and they started talking in millimeters. So okay, we had 87 millimeter rainfall last 2 weeks, and then this year we had 625 millimeter rainfall. So they started talking in millimeters from saying good or bad rainfall. And so that's the sort of change that happened. But it was not everything smooth, and it was not everything easy. So when we work or when you work with people, uh, you get lots of difficulties because you have to change the attitude of people, you have to understand the people, you have to change your way of working if you want to succeed working with people. And so one of the BJs, for example, because these BJs, they didn't realize what they are doing in terms of the importance of the data they collect. So one of the BJs, his name uh, is Hariram. So he uh, was measuring every week, and then one day he actually didn't go to the well, and he just reported based on his last value and some guess. Okay, the water level is um, 22.6 meter. And so the BJ facilitator, he randomly used to check these BJ's measurements in the beginning. And so he found that the Hariram's reading is not matching with what he observed. So he immediately went with his motorbike to his home and said, "Look, Hariramji, you have your measurements is very different than mine. So uh, we can't keep you. This is something wrong, and we can't keep you as a BJ." And then within few minutes, he immediately confessed that he he didn't go to the well, and he just took the reading. And but Hari Ramji, was he wanted to do, but he didn't understand the importance of the accurate measurement. So he said, "No, no, I want to do." And these BJs are paid very little money, 1,000 rupees a month. And all they need to do is every Sunday morning they take the readings of 10 wells, and they report back to the BJ facilitator, whose his name is Prahlad. So they were he asked, and then he said, "Okay, Ramji, you want to do, but how can you believe? How can we believe you that you will you will not do this sort of reading?" And eventually he said, "Look, we can go to this temple here, and I will take oath, and I will let's go there." So they went there, and then he took the oath, and what happened, I think that transformed him and transformed the other beaches as well. They also realized that how important that is. And Hariramji is now the champion of all the beaches. And he even presented in 2017 this the big conference organized in Nagpur and Bhujal Manthan, and where Water Minister Nitin Gadkari ji was there, and more than 2,000 people gathered in there, and he was one of the speakers telling his experience as a BJ and importance of this. So this is how it changed. And this is one of the villages where these BJs monitor, and it really started showing the pattern of different wells and how it will, what level it changes and so on. And also we measured the, because recharge is important, so we monitored the check dams, and we did all sorts of water balance, and these are all the data monitored by these BJs, these villagers. We also had these sensors, because we didn't know how good these BJs will work. So we put groundwater sensors which will monitor groundwater depth every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day. And so we had a backup. But after a couple of years, we realized our BJs are much better, or they will do a good job. So we didn't continue with these monitoring sensors. And so all this BJ data we have published internationally. We did the water balance, for example, and this is what it proved, that if you train people, you capacity build, you nurture them, you provide ongoing support, they can do anything. And we also developed this my well, because people are collecting every week data, and so 350 data set between Rajasthan and Gujarat in only just um, 11 villages, and it was getting too much, so we developed this app called my well. And the idea is anyone can see how much water level is there, how much rainfall is occurred, and so on. So it's making invisible resource visible. And the ultimate idea is to develop these village groundwater cooperatives. So if we are in the process now. So we have started 3 cooperatives in Rajasthan and 2 in Gujarat. So what we are doing is grouping 10 to 15 farmers and their land together, and then uh, help them to recharge, help them to develop some framework so that they can share groundwater. And ultimately, what will happen is you have the village level groundwater management uh, cooperatively. No one is competing, but cooperating and sharing groundwater. And so we had some success, but still a long way to go. Maybe I think I have taken 1 hour already, so I will come to the conclusion part. Also, one more thing I want to say is, if we want to manage groundwater properly, we need to engage with women. We need to make sure that we have good social inclusion and all those things. Because having women or some other groups brings some perspectives which we can miss easily and can affect long-term sustainability, and also uh, the overall, I think, outcomes will be better if we have more harmonized management system. So what Marvi has done, from coming together as a BJs and learning together. So that was the really important part. And we were able to engage farmer for social learning, means learning at their own level and in their own settings. Uh, so that was very important, and collaborative learning means learning from each other, and that's very important, especially in water and in groundwater. And the another aspect that came out of this work was groundwater is a common pool. So if we want to sustain groundwater, we need to work together, act together. Otherwise, there is no sustainable solution. And the final point I want to make is groundwater commons, means groundwater is a common resource, means it belongs to everyone, and it will be better. Effective communication is more important. So communication happens when you know what is happening. So water level fluctuation, rainfall, water quality, and once we know what is there, how much water is there, then we can help them to come together, learn together, and work together. That will be the final solution. So I think I will stop here and maybe can um, answer any questions or comment people have. So I'll stop sharing.
Um, thank you, sir. So, if anyone has any questions, you can raise your hand and we'll call you in order. By then, Naren Shah sir had a question.
So anyone has any question or comment?
Hello, hello.
There was a question, somebody, I think it's Narendra Shah, or Narendraji. So Marvi, actually, name comes from managing aquifer recharge and sustaining groundwater through village level intervention. So this name we came from one of the first workshops we had, and there is some story behind also, but I think not a village, any village.
Thank you, sir. Pavan, you can ask your question.
Hello, sir. It was nice to hear your talk. It was very much informative.
Any
I have
comment
one.
or any question from
Yes.
anybody?
Can you hear me? I have one comment. Like, is this model? There is one Andhra Pradesh farmers managed groundwater system project by birds. So that is also similar to the MARVI. And
Hello.
hello, can you hear me? Hello, Abhinav.
Yeah, Pavan, you are audible.
Why don't you try typing also at the same
Yes.
time?
Hello, sir.
Yes, hello.
Pavan, you can ask your question.
No, no. Like I have one comment. Like, is this the program Marvi is there? It's there is one similar program like Andhra Pradesh farmer managed groundwater system project by birds. Do you know about that?
Yeah, yes, I know very well.
Yeah.
So that was one of the, I think, very good examples of how you can connect with community. And my understanding is this program continued for about 10 years. And the idea of that program was to provide educational aspects to the community. So m- the concept behind this was, if you educate the community farmers about groundwater monitoring and so on, there will be better management will come. So that worked for a time, but actually, as the project wound off, uh, those things didn't continue. So what we have done is we built on the APFAM's experience. So in addition to providing training, we also created these champions, Bujal Jankars, and how, and also these related science and also connected with the community government. So that's the difference. So APFAM's project was more on training and education of the community, whereas the MARVI, it was training and education plus the local champions and the connection with the government, policymakers, and so on. But it was a good question.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Shashank. Shashank, can you raise your question?
Yeah, thanks, Abhinu. Good afternoon, sir. Sir, my question is in the MARVI project, while trying to uh, manage groundwater demand, so did the project also face some challenges related, socio-economic challenges related to caste or difference in attitude of farmers due to difference in landholding, class, and other similar issues? And how did you deal with such issues if they were there?
Yeah. So, for example, when we were uh, working with these village groundwater cooperatives, so some farmer didn't have well, and some had a well and good groundwater supply in their well. And so when discussion started, okay, let's form this cooperative. And the obvious question was, uh, why will this particular person who has a big land area and good well will share water with me? uh, so there was that sort of question, and then eventually that boiled down to the, okay, okay, you have the groundwater today, but if another farmer drills deeper, um, then your well will dry. So you don't have really guaranteed supply, and that really changed the conversation. Now coming back to your social aspect, socio-economic aspect, so we did survey both watershed in detail with the focus groups and one-to-one survey, and try to understand uh, attitude of farmers about groundwater, their socio-economic condition, and how that relates to their dependency on groundwater. So, but I think in this particular project, we didn't find any sort of resistance to from say different caste or like that. But we did see there was a lot of resistance to engage women. So for example, the one field survey we did last year, that some people didn't think that engagement of women is important, and also some women thought they're probably not capable of playing any role. But then when we talked a little bit more in detail, they demonstrated that they can do things, certain things they can easily do. So there is that issue. And so for managing groundwater, we definitely need to address the issues of gender, social inclusion, and things like that.
Okay. So we have one more question from Amok, who is a MTech second year student. And he says that he is working on a design solution that monitors groundwater usage for irrigation pumps. And he says that what could be the possible farmer reactions if we tell them that we are going to attach these units that can monitor their irrigation value. So would they allow us to monitor their usage is one of his concerns.
So, did you say bore or just a
Yeah, yeah,
dug well?
yes, sir.
So, what we monitor was in open wells, but farmer most likely will not allow to interfere with their bore. So that is a concern. But I have come to know, even in Maharashtra, I think someone was working on this. So uh, without disturbing the bore, by having some sound on the bore and measuring the echo of the sound, you can estimate the groundwater depth. And when I talked to this person about a month ago, he said his app and his way of measuring is reasonably accurate and can be used. So I think if that is true, uh, then we can monitor bores also without much difficulty. And he was
Okay.
saying that it's very accurate within 5 centimeters, and I thought 5 centimeter is nothing. Even 10 centimeter within 10 will be okay if you're measuring a 100-meter deep well.
Uh, Shah sir has also added a question, and he says that in Australia, do the farmers resort to as much groundwater as our farmers in our certain regions of India do?
No. So in Australia, they're still dependent on the surface water. Groundwater is probably about 10% of the all the agricultural water used. So, but there is a pressure on use of groundwater, but at the same time, you have to obtain license, and there are a lot of regulation there.
Okay. Anand Kumar, you can raise your question.
Yeah, hello, sir. Sir, thanks a lot for this wonderful session, sir. And when we're discussing about these Bujal Jankas, so I got really inspired to see how the local villages are getting empowered. So here I got curious and got a question, sir. So is this Bujal Jankas program also include the school students who can be potentially the next generation farmers and also motivates them to do the farming more scientifically in the future?
Yes. So what we did, we thought of involving them in groundwater monitoring, but it's for safety reasons we didn't do this. But we did uh, uh, help the schools to monitor rainfall, for example. So uh, we installed some boards there in each of the schools in these villages, and these school children will monitor rainfall. They display the rainfall, and they started trying to understand the magnitude of rainfall. So if rain was like this is how much amount it is. So if you ask someone, okay, what could be the rainfall, they won't say 1,000 millimeter, but they will know, okay, 10 or 15 or 20 or 100 millimeter. So I think that we were trying to do this groundwater literacy, and for that we also developed some books in Hindi, English, Gujarati. So I would like to share those books. Um, so if you go to the MARVI website, and there's a publication thing and tab, and there are these books available. So one is Our Groundwater, Hindi, English, Gujarati, and then there is a book on groundwater stories. These are the stories uh, narrated by villagers themselves, and they took the photos. They wrote their captions. So there's a photo voice book called Groundwater Stories. Maybe worth having a look.
Now, I request Priya ma'am, you can
Yeah,
ask.
sorry. Yeah, Professor Maheshwari, I have one question. So, yeah, teaching villagers, I mean, this is an excellent initiative to, teach people about their environment and to involve them in the science and, data collection. What I want to know is, has there been any study on any changes that have happened after this intervention in the actual irrigation practices or the agricultural practices, and what are they and how have they happened?
Okay, so uh, for example, the person I mentioned, Hariram, so he became a sort of leader of the all the BJs in Rajasthan. So he used to grow. So we did a lot of demonstration of different crops and irrigation methods and so on as a part of the project. And so he was growing wheat crop, and wheat crop requires about 5 to 6 irrigations. And he started growing this Kali Tulsi. So Kali Tulsi requires only 3 irrigations. So he started doing this, and his income was more or less same as if he was growing wheat. And when the other farmers saw this, they also started growing the following year. Some more started, and then the following year after that, um, probably 20 25 farms started growing. So that was a sort of change, because that happened uh, through the engagement in this project, and that motivation that came. In Gujarat, many farmers changed from surface irrigation to drip and sprinkler. So that also changed in water's demand side. So these were the changes, and also the awareness. I think the big change was uh, that they are pumping from the same pool of the groundwater resource. So water is not limited to their well, but they are tapping into a bigger resource, and so they need to work together. And so they can what they do in their well can affect other people, or what other people can do can affect me, their particular well. So that was the change. I give you another example. So when we started this project, the when these BJs were going from one well to another well on every Sunday morning. So in the beginning, the well owners will ask, "What are you doing?" And they will explain, "Oh, we are measuring the water level, and this is a project by this university," and so on. And so that was the conversation in the beginning for first couple of months. Then slowly the conversation shifted. They started asking, how much was my water level last week or last month? And then towards the end, so this relate to the first meeting we had in when we started this project in one of the villages in Rajasthan. We invited all the farmers and other people to the school hall, and we said, look, we brought this project for you, and we'd like to work with you and help you with your groundwater issue. And 3 4 people stood up and said, look, we really welcome you, but we don't need this research here. And we thought, oh, what are they saying? That's very dangerous. So they said, look, we know the solution. So whatever money you have, you just give to us, and we will drill deeper, and there is plenty of groundwater underground. So you just give the money, we drill deeper, and our problem will be solved. And we said, no, we can't do this, because we have funding body requirement. We have to produce some data and some outputs and so on. So they agreed, okay, no problem. So this, but with this monitoring, so when we had the next meeting, similar meeting, uh, same group of farmer, they said, look, groundwater is not unlimited. So what get recharged is what we can do. So we need to really manage it better. And they, even one of the BJs explained to the other farmers, look, this is my mobile phone, and if I don't recharge every day, or if I don't use properly, the battery will finish quicker, or my phone won't work. And same thing applies to groundwater. So if we don't recharge and don't use properly, you use more than what is recharged, you will run out of water, and that's what has happened. So that's the sort of change happened. So at the people level, at the thinking level, and some of the changes in practices as well.
Yeah, so the I was talking to you about this project on climate resilient agriculture earlier before the talk started, and this water budgeting exercise is something that's being done there too within every village to let the farmers know what crops they can grow in the Rabi season based on rainfall, etc. However, I do feel that the farmers, like you talked about sprinkler and drip usage, and essentially the government policies have to work in conjunction with the expected move for farmers, because only a community aspect of the fact that there's only so much water available may not be enough unless the government also supports them with other kind of interventions or other policies.
Yeah, that's true. So what we are saying that the say when we form these cooperatives, so if the government programs can be directed towards those people in a village level, for example, then they start showing the example. This is what can be done, and once people, when the other farmers realize this works and these are the benefits, then you start seeing multiplication effect. And so I think there in what is called in India is convergence. So there are several agencies, several departments working on different things, and they need to converge. So in this case, I think if they can converge on groundwater sustainability, so in terms of recharge and use, so it's very important. I think you made a good point.
We have a question from Meeta here, and she says that you mentioned about giving water quality monitoring training. So, what parameters were majorly measured, and what methods of analysis were taught, and what was the accuracy of their measurements?
Okay, so for the BJs, uh, we provided them with this probe which can measure pH and EC. So that gave some idea of how this water quality parameter is changing. But at the same time, we also collected samples for fluoride, nitrogen, phosphorus in groundwater, and also E. coli. So even I was talking to group in this MARVI project area. So they are measuring E. coli also, because some of the wells are used for drinking water, and if E. coli are above the acceptable limit, then it can be not good for health of the community. So uh, so these are the parameters measured, and that gives some idea. So in Rajasthan, for example, fluoride is a problem. So even in the first meeting we had in the village, in the villages, they said, look, irrigation, we need water for growing crops, but our issue is fluoride at the moment, because many of our people are having joint problem, and even say 40-year-old person can't walk, and they felt that it might be due to fluoride. So first thing we did was monitored fluoride in these drinking wells, and found out, and then explained to them this is what is happening, and then we came up with some solutions. um, but still it's a lot of work to be done.
Okay, so we have one more. We have last two questions, and one of them is regarding from Pranath, and he says that he has worked with ACT for a month in Gujarat, and they found that in the village level participatory approach, it takes a top to down approach where most of the recharge structures are found in the land of large land folding farmers, and small and marginal farmers did not participate much in the participatory process. So how Marvi is addressing these issues?
So I think that is an issue, and the way to address is um, we need to be inclusive. So bring people together, not work with one particular group, but to work with the as a whole village or whole watershed, and that will take some time, I think, to people realize that groundwater is a common and resource of everybody, not people who have money to drill deeper or who have the well, but it's a common property. And that feeling comes when they understand and when we work with them and bring that sort of feeling. And my uh, experience and feeling with through this project is initially it was very hard. People were thinking this is my well, my farm, and I don't care. But the whole conversation shifted within those villages. So I think the engagement is the solution. Giving information, so water level data, rainfall data. When people start talking sort of science, groundwater science at their own w- way, I think then the conversation is much more objective, and also um, you become more solution oriented.
Okay, sir.
So
Uh,
the Marvi, I think we have shown the how we can engage people, and there is another approach which could be more effective, but not solve everything. I think there are still um, important issues like you mentioned.
we have a question from Praveen Kolhe, and he says that in Maharashtra it is observed that when groundwater is enhanced through the interventions like Jalyukt Shivar schemes, farmers tend to grow water-intensive crop, and socio-political environments support this. So, what solutions can be adopted in such situations?
Yes, so I think that will happen, but if we um, if we do that as a group thing, means whole village or whole group of farmers say, look, we are working together and we will monitor how much groundwater is there and how much rainfall was there and work together. I think then people will look after each other. But if okay, we do this recharge and the water level has gone up, and then it left, then we leave the people to use this groundwater, then people who have bigger pump, who have more money, they will take all the water. And the more recharging is not the solution. Same thing. I give an example here. So in Australia, in Sydney, there is a big dam which supplies water to uh, whole of Sydney, which is about 45 lakh people. And when this drought happens about 10 years ago, so one of the radio personality who is very strong in mm, commentary and so on. So he wanted to interview me, and so I gave an interview and asked me, we need to raise the dam wall so that we can store more water. And my point was, raising the dam wall won't solve the problem. You can have more water, but if we keep using more water, then we will be always end up shortage of water. So same with the groundwaters. You can recharge as much as you like, but if demand is not monitored, controlled properly, we will run out of water, groundwater. And so um, I think tomorrow is Gandhiji's, or 2nd of October, 2 days later. They're saying that there's enough in the world for everybody's need, but not enough for everybody's greed. And same applies to groundwater. So we need to something, I think, need to change the mindset. And initially it may seem very difficult, but I think as human beings, once we understand, like what has happened in this pandemic, for example, I think people have come to realization what is important, what is possible, what is not important. And same thing, when we run out of water, I think we realize.
Okay, sir. So we have the last question from Neetu Singh, and she wants to ask about the MyWell app, and she's curious that whether the farmers are able to use it properly. And one of our concerns is that is crowdsourcing a successful thing in rural areas?
So our experience is, yes, it can be used, and nowadays many farmers have smartphone with the um, internet connection, even in the villages, very good internet connection in some of the villages. And if you give them training, and we have this app at the moment in Hindi, English, Gujarati, and if we keep this simple, and also we have put a this photo function in there, so when they take the reading, they can take the photo of the reading, and so that records the time and location of the reading. So you could be more or less sure that it is not fudged. Same with the rainfall, they can take the reading and can do that way. So my response is yes, it is possible, and I think in my view that is the future. So in groundwater, if we can monitor four things: one is the water level in the well, second is the rainfall, third one is the water quality, and fourth one is the water level in check dams, the dams which recharge. If we have these four aspects monitored at every village level, we know what is happening to groundwater, more or less. Maybe not precisely, but we can estimate, and we are better off. And I was talking to the joint secretary in the Jal Shakti ministry, and I suggested that this rain gauge, which we have used in MARVI project, so I took this rain gauge rain gauge from Australia to these villages, and it cost only $5 or $6, which is about 300 rupees. And very simple tube, UV protected, and you just install in your home on the roof or whatever, and just take the reading. And in India, we have 6 lakh villages, and if every village has these two rain gauges, yeah, one in school and one BJ, we have whole India covered with very little expense, and that can provide almost instantaneous, in almost real time, how much rainfall. So you can check. At the moment, rainfall is very limitedly available, and what we found was one village has got 450 total rainfall, and another one, which is only 3 kilometers away, had nearly 600 millimeter rainfall. So that much is the variation. So if we don't know how much rainfall, then our groundwater balance and sort of estimation won't go correct. So I think I strongly suggest that we should have uh, rainfall measurement in every village, and not only this measurement, but I think once they measure, they start talking about how much rainfall, how much water level, how much is the change in water level from June to September because of the recharge from monsoon. And if that sort of conversation happens, we will achieve. So it just changes the attitude and language.
Thank you, sir. So we are at the concluding segment. So I request Pen and Chinnasamy sir to give the vote of thanks, and then we shall conclude with the session. Sir.
Yeah, thanks, Amog. Thanks, Professor Basant Maheshwari, for enlightening us on how field work is very important because most of the students will be going to the field and they will be looking at TD 609 for the field work and how they can integrate with the common public stakeholders and how they can collect data, local data collection. How can they encourage local data collection? Because I've always been teaching the learnings from the MARVI project in my class 603. And I think most 99% of students would have seen the pictures of MARVI before your talk because I've used them in my class extensively, especially that water rainfall gauge that you mentioned. And what I teach in class, you clearly mentioned here, is at one point we are okay with a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of error in the measurement, because it doesn't make a big difference in the budget, but that water budget is very information. So, and also the training of the trainers, like how we could train the farmers to train other farmers and getting the first, since I've been very closely associated with MARVI, I've seen that the first farmer was the difficult one, and then it's a chain reaction and things happen very well for groundwater literacy and policy changes with World Bank and Jal Shakti. So with this, the final take-home message for the students, I would say, is a collective measurement is needed for groundwater resources. And Professor Basant Maheshwari's research and teamwork has shown that predominantly well. And there's a lot of papers and books written on it. And with this, I'd like to thank Professor Basant Maheshwari for sharing his knowledge for me personally and for all the class students and Siddharth. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Penan. Thank you, Dr. Jadhav, and all the. I can still see 50 people there. So thank you for your attention. And if any of you want to know more or want to contact me, Penan can provide you with my email address. And if you happen to work in groundwater and something you want to do at a village level, please do contact us. And Penan has been the one of the key people in MARVI, so I'm very proud of him. And also the publications. Penan, would you please share the MARVI website and the publications with them?
Yes, sure.
So thank you again, and you please take care, and all the best to you.
Thank you, Dr. Maheshwari. Thanks.